So I'm in full dad mode right now. And what I mean by that when I say that is I find myself walking around my house and saying things that my father used to say to me and my sisters when we were kids. Hey, who left the door open? Why are all the lights on in here? Nobody ever turns the lights off. Who turned up the thermostat? You know, things that my dad would always say. I'm not sure if your parents ever said this. You know, you left the door open. You're letting all the cold air in. I wanted to talk about that today because I think right now you might be leaving a door open in your life for trouble to get in. And what it's doing is that it's allowing things to take root in your life that you really don't want there. On a macro scale, the last handful of years probably haven't been very comfortable for you. There's been a lot of uncertainty. We're walking through a pandemic and COVID-19. There's been a lot of political unrest and upheaval. There's been all kinds of other things that are going on, whether it be shortages of this or price hikes, inflations, all these different things. And what it does is it sort of creates this uncertainty. Now, some of these things may have directly affected you through job loss or sickness or whatnot, and some of them might not have directly affected you or your family, but you're still feeling the impacts. Like myself, I'm more of an introvert, but it's pushing me to like dangerously low levels of like human connection and community and actually being out and interacting with people, which is so key to our mental health and our personal growth and actually being able to be out in life. And my argument today is that one of our reactions has been that we have turned towards seeking comfort. What caught my attention about this was an interview that I listened to between Dave Hollis and Carey Neufeld. And Dave said something that really stuck out to me. He said, "We are attracted to comfort even if it is killing us." And I was like, what? Pardon? I paused the interview. I went back. I listened to it again. He said, "We are attracted to comfort even if it is killing us." So he went on to kind of explain and say, that we seek comfort because it's familiar. We expect a small dopamine hit or a release of anxiety or relaxation or whatever it is, even if the long-term effects of that comfort are actually very detrimental, maybe possibly even killing us in the long term. Now, of course, not all comfort is bad. Some comfort is really important for rest, healing, for relaxation, for restoring yourself. And that's not what we're talking about here. When you look back over the last 24 hours and you made a decision last night to just sort of chill out and all of a sudden you're doom scrolling and an hour's gone by and you're like, what just happened? And you look back and you go, you know what? If I could do that again, I probably wouldn't make the same choice. I wouldn't make the same decision. Those are the types of things that I want to look at today. So, what are some of these things that it might be? Now, it might be comfort eating or drinking, possibly alcohol or, doing something to numb sort of your senses. Could be doom scrolling on social media. I found that that's really amped up, something I'm trying to be aware of in my own life. Like, am I just sitting there, just scrolling through things and all of a sudden half an hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours has gone by and you're like, oh my gosh, this has to stop. This was a bigger one, much larger conversation than here, but is it pornography? And that can be so incredibly destructive. It could be any one of these things that's creeping up in your life, but you got to watch for them. You've got to be aware of them and sort of recognize that they're happening in your life. Sometimes I think that our thought process, even if it's subconsciously, especially when we're in today's world where we're dealing with so much uncertainty, we have this thought in the back of our mind, well, if I just wait, things will get better. Like the world will get better. Maybe I seek a little bit of comfort right now to make myself feel better. If I wait a couple of years, months, whatever it is, things will get better. When I can go back to church with my family, when I can be out in community, when I have time in my schedule, then I'll exercise. That's just not happening in my life. So I have to make the time to be physically active. If I wait for X, then I'll do, Y. That sort of strategy never really works because now you're building up a habit. Now you got to try and uproot it in the future to try and replace it with something positive. But the longer you do it, the harder it gets to uproot it. But there's got to be some ways out of it. And I think that there are. And I want to propose 3 different questions that we can kind of ask today. The thing is that if you thought the discussion about being comfortable was uncomfortable, the questions are even more uncomfortable. All right. So the first question that I propose you ask yourself to sort of push yourself out of your comfort zone is, am I proud of who I am when I'm by myself? Kind of cuts to the core, right? This also came from that interview between Carey Neufeld and Dave Hollis. And I heard him ask the question and I immediately paused and I wrote it down because I'm like, man, there have been so many times in my life where I haven't been proud of who I am when I'm by myself. Because what are the decisions that you make when you're by yourself? That's showing who you are, who your true character is. I can't answer that for you, but you've got to pause. You've got to think about that. Are you proud of who you are when you're by yourself? Second question to kind of pull you out of your comfort zone. This one I think is going to require a little bit more thought. I'd highly encourage you to write it down. Look out 6 months, look out 12 months and say, hey, if I continue this track, if I continue seeking comfort this way, what's my life going to look like? And then if you're willing and you're able and you can think far enough, what if you continued it over 5 years? Or what if you continued it over 10 years? It's always a worthy exercise, but particularly when it comes to something like this, because unless we actually make a conscious decision, you're kind of creating a habit. It's starting to take root in your life. You're sowing seeds in an area that you really don't want. I know you don't, but if we don't recognize it and start to see what it's going to do for us long term, we probably won't have the strength to pull up those roots and to move on to something that's more positive. And the last question that I have, what's the smallest viable action that I could take, that you could take when you're in that position where you're about to seek comfort that would move you in the other direction? You don't want to be in that moment of going, okay, so am I just going to sit down and scroll social media, or oh, what else could I do? Because you can't think of it because you're tired. So you just sit and scroll social media. But what if you had an alternative? Hey, every time I'm going to sit down and scroll social media, I'm going to maybe listen to a podcast and go for a quick walk around the block. You've already picked out in your mind, when I think I'm going to do X, I'm actually going to do Y instead. And make sure it's incredibly simple, incredibly easy to do. Things that are talked about in Atomic Habits, like putting a book on your coffee table or putting a book on your nightstand. So when you think you're going to go pick up the TV remote, you actually have that opportunity to grab a book instead. Little tiny things to allow yourself to win. What's the tiny thing that you could have ready to go that's going to allow you an alternative to pursuing comfort? Is it going to happen every time? No, but let's at least give yourself the opportunity to win and take steps in the right direction. I get it. These can be uncomfortable questions. I'm going to bring up this quote by Pastor Michael Todd. He's out of the States. So often we seek our preference over God's purpose in our lives. And I think that what really got me thinking as I was thinking about comfort and leaving this door open is that when we're doing this, we're not pursuing what God's got as a call for our life, and we're getting further and further away from it. Because, God's not able to work in and through us, I don't believe, when we're just sitting in our comfort zone. He needs us to be up and out and getting uncomfortable and learning and growing and doing new things. So I hope you have an absolutely awesome rest of your week. And hey, is it anybody else? Is it drafty in here? Kids, did you leave the door open again? Man, those darn kids.